Hello! Much has been made of the Piers Morgan interview with Fiona Harvey, the real Martha, as she herself says she is, from Baby Reindeer. So let's have a look at how Fiona Harvey behaves during this interview and what we can gauge about her personality from that.
Well, thank you for joining me, Fiona. First of all, why have you decided to go public?
The internet sleuths tracked me down and hounded me and gave me death threats, so it wasn't really a choice. I was forced into this situation.
What do you hope to achieve in this interview?
I came on your show because you're a veteran broadcaster. I think you'll give me a fair hearing. You were persecuted yourself not so long ago. So that's why I've chosen this show.
He asked what she wanted to achieve from doing the interview. She talks about how Piers Morgan has been persecuted. So right from the beginning, she's taken the focus off her and she's put it onto somebody else, and in a very personal way. She's talking about Piers Morgan as a victim. And then she's buttering him up. She's saying he's going to give her a fair go, he's going to listen to her. People have been saying that she was exploited, that Piers Morgan should never have interviewed her. As far as we know, legally, she's in a position to sign her own documents. So why shouldn't she decide what TV programme she wants to be on? Or in this case, what YouTube channel? And as much as it pains me to say something positive about Piers Morgan, I do actually think that he didn't exploit her. It was her choice to go on the show. She wanted that exposure. And I think he handled the interview very well. I think his questions were really good. Any background noise is the cats running around having their mad time. There's nothing I can do about it. So you might see one speeding across the background. Stalkers always focus on their targets. So whether they love them or whether they hate them, they see them as the cause of all of their problems. So he's asked her if she's watched Baby Reindeer, because after all, that's what they're there to discuss. She's there to talk about how she's been portrayed incorrectly. And it turns out she hasn't even watched it.
But you really haven't watched any of it?
I haven't watched any of it.
You're not curious to?
No, I think I'd be sick.
I can understand why it would make her angry, but she says she thinks she'd be sick. I think that she is, on the one hand, admitting that she would have really strong feelings if she watched it. If you feel nauseous, it usually means something deep is going on inside you. And I think the other thing she's doing is insulting the series. That would make me sick. It's really telling us that this is a terrible, terrible drama that shouldn't be on TV.
It's taken over enough of my life. I find it quite obscene. I find it horrifying, misogynistic.
It makes me think of those things they used to have in fun fairs when I was a kid. I don't know if they still have those in fun fairs now. They used to have these corridors you'd walk down, and there were mirrors in them that made you look funny. So there'd be one that made you look really tall and thin, and one that made you look short and fat. And they distorted you in various ways. And now she talks about the drama as being obscene and horrifying. I think the way she sees herself is very, very different from the way in which she comes across. And that's a big red flag. If someone really has no insight into the way they come across, if they have huge blind spots that cover most of how they come across, even if not every fact was correct in the series. So it looks like that is the case. For instance, it doesn't seem that she did get convicted in a court for stalking, and it doesn't seem that she did go to prison for it. But nevertheless, if the majority of what goes on in the series is true, if she really did stalk someone, then watching herself do that and watching the light she's portrayed in, even if she's only seen the trailer, is going to have a big impact on her. All of her defense mechanisms are going to be pushing that truth away. It will feel like something that is nauseating. In the same way as we can feel like that when someone we love turns out not to be who we thought they were. People often talk about feeling sick. So I wonder if what's happened here is she has seen enough and or heard enough to really get a sense of how she is portrayed in the series. And that is having a really strong effect on her because it's so vile. It's so impossible for her to be able to come to terms with.
Some of the death threats have been really terrible online.
She's already mentioned she's had death threats and now she's bringing them up again. And she's saying some of the death threats have been really terrible. I mean, any death threat would be terrible. So it's interesting how she's doing that. It seems like what she's doing is she's just trying to reinforce this point that she's had death threats. It seems like she had already planned to say that before the interview. She needs to get it in again, make sure that's really clear. But the way that it comes across is she's kind of minimizing it. She's saying only some of them were terrible. Minimizing to try to highlight the death threats. If something is minimized, people feel something doesn't make sense, so they're alerted. There's a gap where there should be sympathy for her, so they're tempted to fill it with theirs. So understating something is a way to get more sympathy and a way to get people to stand up and notice what you're talking about.
When did you know that you were the person being depicted in this?
5 years ago on BBC Breaking News, I saw Mr. Gadd had written a play for the Edinburgh Festival, and he was holding up placards, MP's wife stalker, and all of this, and he'd called it Baby Reindeer. That's all I knew, and I thought, well, I've only met this guy 2 or 3 times. I don't know him.
Fiona Harvey has just said that she's met Richard Gadd 2 or 3 times. So that's a fact that he can prove or disprove. He worked with other people in the pub. There will have been lots of witnesses to how many times they met. Given the fact that there are all these other people who've come forward who've said she stalked them, I think it's unlikely that she only met Richard Gadd 2 or 3 times. She is in danger herself of defaming Richard Gadd. I think she might have a case for defamation, although I'm not a lawyer, I'm not legally trained, I'm just giving my 2 pennies worth. You know, I think she might have a case for that because untruths do appear to have been told, and we were all told it was a true story. And on top of that, she was easily tracked down. But if she's telling lie after lie about Richard Gadd, then he equally could be suing for defamation because she's reaching an audience and that could affect his career. Taking this dangerous risk would say something about her character. Is she a risk taker who is arrogant enough to assume she will come out on top? Or is she deluded about what actually happened?
And when did you know that Netflix were doing something?
2 weeks ago. I had just moved flats, so it was 2 weeks ago past Saturday.
And how did you hear?
I saw on BBC Breaking News that he'd sold to Netflix, and both he and this character, Martha, this Jessica actress, seemed to be promoting mercilessly.
Promoting mercilessly is an interesting phrase. It actually made me laugh. I've never heard it before. And what does it mean? Because if you promote something, if you're in a Netflix series, she's talking about Richard Gadd and the lead actress who played Martha. You're promoting the series in that case because you want to promote your career. In Richard Gadd's case, maybe he wanted to get everyone to see the story, you know, because it meant so much to him as he wrote it. And if you're Netflix, you're getting these people out to promote the series because you want to make money from it. However you look at it, the goal is not to try to upset and torment Fiona Harvey. But she's seeing it as that because they're promoting this series mercilessly. So she's seeing it as that they are intending to torment her mercilessly. They're not going to stop. They show no mercy at how much energy they're putting into promoting this. So it's all about her and it's all about the impact it has on her. And she is seeing other people's intentions as being about her in whatever way. And you'll see this all the way through the interview that she does this. And it's a real sign into her character and into the way she thinks.
I've come off Facebook as of yesterday.
Are you on X, what used to be Twitter?
No, I'm not.
Because you
on
had an
Twitter.
account.
Yeah, that's right. Years and years ago. I'm scared to Google up BBC Breaking News. I'm certainly scared to Google up the Daily Mail in case I am on it in some bizarre circus.
Here she seems to be saying that she doesn't want to look herself up. She's scared to do it because she's scared to see how she is being portrayed. And it's the fear that's interesting, because I can imagine that it might make you angry. You know, again, I can imagine that if you see someone portraying you incorrectly, it could make you angry. But why would it make you afraid? Compare Fiona Harvey's attitude, being so afraid of seeing how she's been portrayed that she doesn't watch the series or go on social media, to the attitude of someone who took out a temporary restraining order on her. Laura Ray watched the interview Ms. Harvey did with Piers Morgan twice before asking Piers Morgan to come on his show and set the record straight. She said Fiona Harvey was defaming her. She was shocked and angry, but she wasn't afraid, and she certainly wasn't too afraid to watch the interview that she was complaining about. And that doesn't necessarily mean that what is being said or how she's being portrayed is true. So you could have negative thoughts about yourself and be afraid that other people see those things you see about yourself. Either way, I think it's an insight into her fear that there's truth in how she's being portrayed.
The sleuths, as you say, had found your tweets. They compared some of the phraseology. They'd done the maths and they worked out this was you that was being depicted. How did that make you feel?
Absolutely horrendous.
So he's asked her the question, how did it make you feel when internet sleuths tracked you down? She's answered it, horrendous. But then she's about to go off at a tangent, and she does that in order to make passive-aggressive digs at two people. Watch how she does this.
Absolutely horrendous. I couldn't believe he'd done that. And so long after first meeting, you know, we're talking 10, 12 years ago, really horrendous. I didn't know who to trust. I was told by the Daily Mail, don't trust those bleeps in Scotland. Whereas I found John Dingwall of the Daily Record completely wonderful, actually. He's acted with total courtesy. I couldn't believe this had happened.
So first she makes a dig at Richard Gadd, even though that's not the question. The question isn't about him, it's about how she felt. But she's talking about how she can't believe Richard Gadd did this when she had been in his life so long ago. So in other words, you know, he should have got over it by now. How could he suddenly still be talking about this?
They'd done the maths and they worked out this was you that was being depicted. How did that make you feel?
Absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. I couldn't believe he'd done that. And so long after first meeting, you know, we're talking 10, 12 years ago.
And then she uses triangulation. She praises a journalist from the Daily Record, and she does that in order to shame a journalist from the Daily Mail. And that's the journalist who has said since that she harassed him.
Really horrendous. I didn't know who to trust. I was told by the Daily Mail, don't trust those bleeps in Scotland. Whereas I found John Dingwall of the Daily Record completely wonderful, actually. He's acted with total courtesy. I couldn't believe this had happened.
There's a lot of passive aggression throughout this interview, and that takes her off at different tangents. And that in itself can show us how she isn't self-aware, because she isn't aware of how transparent this is.
I want to play a little clip. This is just some of the reaction to Baby Reindeer from members of the public.
She ends up becoming the craziest stalker I ever seen in my life.
And this is all a true story.
This is all a true story, yeah. And they've found the real woman online.
I think it's unlikely that it's a coincidence that Fiona Harvey drinks water right now.
So I assume in the actual thing, they've obviously given her a different name. It's a different woman. But you know what I find?
This is when somebody is talking about his impression of the character that she is supposed to have inspired. And that makes me think that maybe her heart is beating fast and her mouth is getting dry, that there's adrenaline inside her, you know, because she's having a fight or flight response.
This the craziest stalker I ever seen.
She opens her mouth before she reaches for the water, so she might need more breath because her heart is beating faster.
In my life.
And this is all a true story.
This is all a true story, yeah. And they've found the real woman online.
So I assume in the actual thing, they've obviously given her a different name. It's a different woman, but
I do think that this is going to be feeling really unpleasant for her. Yet she chose to be in this interview, and she's chosen to be in other interviews. So why would she do that if this is unpleasant for her? I think she's doing it in order to express her rage and to try to get back at Richard Gadd.
they always manage to find a similar looking woman, and the build tends to be the same.
I have a theory about this, though. I feel like he's done it on purpose because he knew that people would find her and he wants to make her life hell a bit.
When you hear that, what do you think?
The final guy on there, I think, is correct. I think he always wanted this to come out, to persecute someone, to take attention away from him and this rape allegation.
So she claims Richard Gadd tried to make her character recognisable in order to take attention away from the rape allegations. But how does that make sense? He put the rape into the series. So why would he want to draw attention away from it?
And I just generally think he's got extreme psychiatric problems.
This is a smear campaign. The world is going to think she's the one with the severe psychiatric problems after they've watched Baby Reindeer. That makes her feel sick, she said, to see herself in that light. It feels obscene. Everything she is afraid of feeling about herself, she's feeling about him. That's what I think. And she wants to encourage everybody else to see him like that. Because as long as Richard Gadd is crazy, she isn't. She's sane and she's believable in her mind. But of course, what she's really doing is she's proving Richard Gadd right. She's proving right all the things he's saying about her in the series. That she is somebody who will suddenly pop up and burst into a furious rage and start insulting him. She may not be raising her voice, but the rage is very evident in the way she's behaving.
It's a work of fiction, it's a work of hyperbole, as I've always said. And there are two true facts in that. His name is Richard Gadd, and he worked as a jobbing barman on benefits in the Holy Arms.
She's saying he was working while receiving benefits. He was working part-time as a barman. Maybe he was really struggling at that time in his life. And now, just as he's really successful, doing really well, probably financially, she's decided it's a good time to bring this up. It reminds me of when she claimed to social services that Laura Ray had hit her child. It's like she's scrambling about for anything that's going to get these people into trouble.
The show shows you coming in and he offers you a cup of tea. Is that what happened?
No, that's not correct. I was in for a meal with a drink of lemonade and I was very, very hungry. I'm diabetic, so very hungry. So that's.
And did you talk to him?
He interrupted a conversation. There was another barman there, and he said, "Oh, you're Scottish," and basically commandeered the conversation. I was talking to somebody. It's pretty rude to interrupt. So he seemed to be obsessed with me from that moment onwards.
I mean,
he was really rude to have interrupted a conversation, and yet she clearly liked him at the very least because she's admitted herself that she sent him a letter sympathising with him. But I imagine looking back at their interactions, she is filled with bitterness about every one of them. You know, that when she says how rude that was of him, she is trying to slate him to the public. She's trying to get us all to see what a terrible person he is in order to punish him. And that she's also feeling it. You know, she's now, everything he did will be under this judgmental gaze of hers, because all of the shame she feels as a result of this Netflix series, I think that she's projecting onto him. And so he is becoming this shameful creature, and he is becoming an object of horror and disgust. She says he was obsessed with her. This is interesting because she's done this before. In the last video, I talked about this guy from the Daily Mail, this journalist who claims to have been harassed by her. And he talks about the number of calls he got from her, and what he describes is actually stalking. When she talked about him, she claimed that he had harassed her, that he wouldn't stop calling her. So I believe this is the exact same thing that's happening now. She's putting this on to Richard Gadd. She's saying he was the one with the obsession. He's obsessed with her. She knows that he wasn't obsessed with her. She knows that the journalist wasn't obsessively ringing her. That's my opinion. And I think that way because I think she does enough things to show that she's consciously lying. And I'll talk more about that in the next videos as we look further at how she behaves in this interview. But at the same time, she is disgusted by him. So she's adjusting reality to fit with her feelings. And she thinks she's entitled to do that because her feelings towards him must be his responsibility. In other words, it must be his fault that she's disgusted by him. And so he deserves whatever's coming to him.
Just speaking to you, I've never met you before, but you do look and sound very similar to the actress in the drama.
I haven't seen the actress. We're both Scottish. We've both got dark hair. She's considerably younger than me. I think she's about 18 years younger than me.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 58. I'm a year younger than you.
So this is quite telling that she says, I'm a year younger than you. Piers Morgan doesn't appear to notice. His expression doesn't change at all. Maybe that's because he considers that he's famous enough that this is normal. But I think to most of us watching this, it's a bit of a red flag that she knows exactly when he was born. It's a sign that she looks people up and she gets obsessed with them. She finds out every detail that most of us wouldn't bother to find out about. We're not interested. That obsession fits with the idea of her being a stalker because, again, this is somebody who would put the focus onto somebody else in order to not have to face their own problems. As far as they're concerned, their problems are all associated with this one person. And that's the case whether they're in love with them and they think that everything in their life will be great when this person decides they like them back, or whether they hate them, and they just want to bully them and torment them. Everything will be okay when that person is affected enough and punished enough by their treatment of them, when they see them as being really important in their lives. So I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to carry on in the next video because there's more to look at from this interview. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and I'll see you then. No, Tiny, you've already eaten. You've had your breakfast, you've had your brunch, you've had your lunch, and now it's just time to stop for a little bit, okay? When I start making a video, it's when Tiny, one of my cats, realises he's thirsty. He always realises this when I'm making a video. And then he drinks for about 5 minutes from the little cat drinking fountain I've got. And he's a very noisy drinker. I live in a helicopter flight path, so you're probably going to hear them throughout this video. Usually I try and record only when they're further away, but today I'm just trying to get this done so I can actually get it out. Tiny drinking in the background, helicopters flying past. Let's just go. Let's just keep going. I've lost my train of thought. All I can see is just a helicopter buzzing around. And when I first moved here, I thought, well, that's a good thing, because at least they're looking out for sharks, they're helping the swimmers. But actually, it turns out they're not.
Hello. Hello, little parrot. Hello. There's so many of you.